And it really sent me into a tailspin because I was like, how poorly am I conveying my humor? If someone leaves my show and they think, A, I might join a cult, and B, that if I joined a cult, that I don't know that Jenny would have to have sex with Leader more often than I would have to have sex with Leader. So I want to take this moment in the show to point out that some of these are jokes. The point is, I'm in Rome with my family, and it's interesting. Everywhere in Rome that you go, there's these beautiful chapels and statues of Jesus and paintings of Jesus, to the point where I said to our tour guide, I was like, was he here? Because, like, I know he wasn't. Like, I went to Catholic school, but I feel like you guys kind of make it feel like he was. Like, in some ways, Rome is guilty of the original case of cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? Because Jesus didn't get all the fun stuff out of Rome. He didn't get the pizza and the pasta. He didn't get to go, Mamma Mia, with his buddies. All he knows about Rome is that the Romans showed up at his cult in Jerusalem, and they were like, hey, we love what you're doing. It's a great story. It's a classic rags to rags. We feel like it might be more compelling if the protagonist died. No, I know. I'm not happy about it either. And then they killed him, which is really sad, but then actually more perverse than that is they killed him and then they sold paintings of themselves killing him to take over half the world. It's like if the Wilkes Booth family sold Lincoln Logs. Like, so I explained this to the Pope, and he thinks it's hilarious, but he doesn't speak English, so who's to say? And no, we actually didn't perform for the Pope, which I felt like was a missed opportunity, because there's a lot of great comedians there. It was like Chris Rock and Stephen Colbert and Conan O'Brien and David Sedaris and all these people, and me. And by the way, I get that I'm at the bottom of that list. Like, they called me in May to go in June. I'm pretty sure there was an April list, and they got some no's, and then the Pope was Googling comedian on his Dell laptop. And his last name is Bergoglio, and my last name is Birbiglia. And I think he was like, it's a Birbiglia, I'm a Bergoglio. It's my long-lost cousin. And he doesn't talk like that. He's not even Italian. He's from Buenos Aires, but I don't think the comedy community has signed off on that as an accent yet. So until that happens, Mamma Mia, I'm the Papa! We make a pizza with the Eucharist! My dad wouldn't love that joke either. No, we didn't perform for the Pope. The Pope spoke to us, comedians, about comedy. Which is a great example of power corrupting. If you get to a point where you're so good at being a priest that you're like, I'm going to invite Chris Rock over to my house and tell him my thoughts on comedy. It's like if I showed up at NASA and said, I got some thoughts on rockets. I think we should build them and fly in them, but never on the outside like in cartoons. And that concludes my speech about rockets. Now, everyone kiss my wedding ring. Everyone's like, oh, it's sweaty. No, the Pope spoke to us about comedy. And this Pope, if you don't know this Pope, Pope Francis, he's pretty good, but only compared to other popes. I mean, if you met him at a party, you'd be like, this fucking guy? You know what I mean? Like, compared to other popes, he's amazing. And he invited us in to what's called the Apostolic Palace, and he gave a speech about humor. And it was about 40 minutes long, but I jotted down my favorite parts. These are my favorite parts. It was in Italian, but they gave us a translation. He says, "Dear friends, in the midst of so much gloomy news, immersed as we are in many social and personal emergencies, you have the power to spread smiles. You are among the few who have the ability to speak to all types of people from different generations and cultural backgrounds." It's sweet, good, friendly Pope stuff. And then he says, "According to the Bible," this is where he loses me a little bit. "At the beginning of the world, while everything was being created, divine wisdom practiced your form of art for the benefit of none other than God himself, the first spectator of history." Which is oddly a concept that's always bumped me since I was in grade school. Because the spectator of history thing is something they taught when I was growing up. They were like, God is watching you at all times. I took it literally. I was 7. I just thought he was like tailing me in a Chevy Malibu, like, what's Mike Birbiglia up to? Oh, he's hiding porn in the forest. I'm going to make sure he doesn't have a girlfriend until he's 20, and that prophecy came true, so maybe there is a God. But that imagery just stuck with me through my childhood. Like when I was 15, I started masturbating. I just assumed God was watching me do that too, so I would sort of cheat to the camera. Because I wanted to think if he happened to be looking at the monitor at that moment, he would think, I've seen a lot of 15-year-olds masturbate, but this kid's good. I think he might go pro, and I have, which is a happy ending. Not technically, but all right. Then the Pope said, "I'm reminded of the story in the book of Genesis when God promised Abraham within a year he would have a son. He and his wife Sarah were old and childless. She was 23. Sarah conceived and bore a son in her old age, 24. Then Sarah said, 'God has made laughter for me.' That is why they named their son Isaac, which means he laughs." And then finally he says, "Remember this. When you manage to draw knowing smiles from the lips of even one spectator, you also make God smile." Which I thought was nice. And then he gave us rosary beads. He gave us each a little green satchel of rosary beads that he blessed. And I brought them home to my parents in July. It was my dad's 84th birthday. And it was me and my mom and my brother Joe, my sister Jean, and my sister Patty, and all of our kids, my dad's 6 grandchildren, and we're all around my dad. And I brought him these rosary beads. And he lit up. And then my mom said, "Michael, you were called by God. I want you to know." I don't think I was called by God. And when she said this, what I wanted to say was, no, I was called by Jim Gaffigan, who was called by Stephen Colbert, who may have been called by God. But when you've had a year like my parents have had, you find yourself saying things like, yes, I was called by God. So we have a cake for my dad, and then everyone headed home. And I'm just standing there with my dad. He's lying in his bed. And I'm talking to him. He's able to talk, but he doesn't remember anything that's happened in the last year. And so I'm just asking him questions about things that happened a long time ago. He was born in 1940 in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And I said, when you were growing up, were your family members coming back from World War II? And he goes, well, yeah, my Uncle Charlie, and my Uncle Joe, and my Uncle Tony, they all came back, and they had these wild stories about how they were nearly killed. And I said, did you get drafted for Vietnam? And he said, yeah, I got drafted, but then because I was a doctor. They stationed me on a base in Texas, and that's where your mother and I met a lot of our closest friends for the rest of our lives. And I said, when you were growing up, what was your address in Bushwick? And he told me the address, and I put it into my phone, and then I drew a line between my dad's childhood home and his granddaughter Una's childhood home now. It's about 4 miles apart. And I showed it to him. And I thought, how come my dad never told me any of this stuff sooner? And then I thought, how come I hadn't asked? And my dad at this point is getting tired, and he can't really speak anymore. But